Dishonest, violent, horrible. A promiscuous swinger who lied to and cheated on multiple partners. Incredibly, that's how Sean Diddy Combs' own lawyers describe the billionaire music mogul, currently facing serious sex trafficking charges in a New York court.
Time would your party start, let's say?
Like 9:30.
Really? That early?
Yeah.
I could make that.
Yeah.
But I could think of you of starting a party at like midnight. Like, what time will it go till?
That's a different type of party, though.
Uh-huh.
No, it'll go from like 9:30 to like maybe 3 o'clock, 3 o'clock. And then, you know, we have the top 2 floors of the hotel.
Mm-hmm. And then it will carry on there?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Then No, I mean the after party.
Mm-hmm. No, I know about them.
I got something. Because it seems to be like the last year and a half, there's been all this talk about these Hollywood parties. Amber, what's really going on?
He's the host of the party.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that.
He is the host of the party, that's what she said. The already explosive federal trial of Sean Diddy Combs took a turn into the annals of hip-hop's darkest chapter as Suge Knight, the once feared head of Death Row Records, prepared to testify. Appearing via grainy video link from the state penitentiary, where he is serving a lengthy sentence, Knight's presence, even virtual, sent a chilling wave through the courtroom, promising to unearth vendettas and conspiracies that had haunted the music world for nearly 3 decades. Diddy, visibly unnerved, watched the flickering screen where his arch-nemesis materialized. A ghost from a violent past Diddy thought he had long buried. Suge Knight, his voice raspy but filled with a cold, simmering fury, didn't just rehash old rivalries. He leveled a direct and horrifying accusation that Sean Diddy Combs was a central figure in the intricate and deliberate plot to murder Tupac Shakur in Las Vegas in 1996. The New York federal courtroom buzzed with an almost unbearable tension.
No offense to Kevin Bacon, but when it comes to degrees of separation between artists and actors and icons and movers and shakers, nobody is more entwined with the cultural fabric of the past 30 years than Sean Combs, Puff Daddy, Puffy, P. Diddy, whatever you call him. His fingerprints are all over music and television and fashion and fragrances, even the liquor that we've been drinking for decades. And even if you don't know Diddy from Puff Daddy, no judgment, boo. He's had many acts. But he's more than likely made an impression on everybody watching right now. I don't care what your age is.
The prosecution, relentless in its pursuit, had made it clear they intended to prove a decades-long pattern of criminal behavior, arguing that Diddy's alleged abuse of women was just one facet of a larger, more sinister enterprise built on violence, intimidation, and illicit dealings. They had already hinted at connections to past unresolved crimes, and now they were about to call a witness whose name alone evoked one of the most violent and notorious eras in music history. A large video screen was set up in the courtroom facing the jury and the defense table. The prosecutor announced the people call Mary and Knight, who will be appearing via remote video testimony from the Richard J. Accusations often dismissed due to Knight's own criminal history and perceived vendetta. But to hear him testify under oath, even from prison in Diddy's federal trial, was a development no one had truly anticipated. The video feed flickered to life, revealing Suge Knight older, grayer, but his imposing presence and intimidating aura still palpable even through the screen. He wore a standard prison uniform, his face set in a grim expression. He confirmed his identity, his voice a low rumble that seemed to fill the courtroom despite the electronic transmission. The stage was set for a confrontation that transcended Diddy's current charges, reaching back to the blood-soaked origins of his empire. The prosecutor began by establishing Knight's history in the music industry, his role as the head of Death Row Records, and his close association with Tupac Shakur. He then steered the questioning towards the infamous beef between Death Row and Bad Boy Entertainment led by Sean Combs. Knight described the intense rivalry, the threats, and the pervasive atmosphere of violence that characterized that period. Mr. Knight, the prosecutor asked, can you describe the nature of the conflict between your label and Bad Boy Records in the mid-1990s? Suge spoke of it as a war, not just a competition. He alleged that the conflict was fueled by Diddy's ambition and his willingness to use underhanded tactics to undermine Death Row and its artists, particularly Tupac. Were there specific threats made against Tupac Shakur or yourself that you believed originated from Shaw Combs or his associates? The prosecutor continued, Knight affirmed this, stating that the air was thick with threats and that he had received information from multiple sources that Bad Boy affiliates were actively looking to cause harm to him and Tupac. The prosecutor then focused on the events leading up to September 7, 1996, the night Tupac Shakur was fatally shot in Las Vegas while riding in a car driven by Suge Knight himself. He asked Knight to detail any specific intelligence or warnings he had received concerning potential attempts on their lives during that trip to Vegas for the Mike Tyson fight. Knight recounted the electric atmosphere in Las Vegas, the confrontation at the MGM Grand Hotel earlier that evening involving Tupac and Orlando Anderson, a known member of the Southside Compton Crips. He described the heightened sense of danger that seemed to follow them everywhere, a feeling that something violent was imminent. This was the moment the prosecution had been building towards. "Mr. Knight," the prosecutor said, his voice deliberate and clear, "are you aware of any plots, discussions, or offers of money made by Sean Combs to harm or kill Tupac Shakur?" Huge Knight leaned closer to the camera in the prison video room, his eyes burning with an old, cold fury. "Aware?" Knight's voice rasped. Puff didn't just want Pac dead. He put money on it. $1 million. That was the word on the street then, and it's the truth I know now. He put a bounty on Pac's head and on my head too, for that matter. The accusation, so direct, so monumental, hung heavy in the courtroom. Diddy's lead attorney immediately shot to his feet. "Objection, hearsay, lack of foundation. This is a convicted felon spinning tales." The judge acknowledged the objection, instructing the jury that Mr. Knight's statements about what the word on the street was should be regarded with caution, but allowed the prosecutor to continue exploring what Mr. Knight personally claimed. "To know," the prosecutor rephrased. "Mr. Knight, putting aside word on the street, do you have any information from individuals you considered credible at the time, or any observations you made that led you to believe Sean Combs placed a bounty on Tupac Shakur?" Judge Knight smirked a chilling expression. "Credible in that world. You got information from people in the life. And yeah, the information was clear. Puff wanted Pac out of the way permanently." He then claimed that he had been approached indirectly by individuals with ties to East Coast criminal elements who hinted that a large sum of money was being offered by Bad Boy's camp for neutralizing death row's key figures. He alleged that these feelers were put out months before the Las Vegas shooting. Knight continued. Puff was desperate. Pac was outselling him, outshining him. Bad Boy was getting humiliated. Diddy couldn't stand that. He wanted to be the king, and Pac was in his way. That $1 million offer wasn't just a rumor, it was a business proposition in certain circles. He then alleged that certain individuals known to be close to Diddy's security and inner circle were seen in Las Vegas around the time of the Tyson fight. Individuals who had no legitimate business being there, other than in Knight's opinion to coordinate or observe the planned hit. He named no names in this specific part, citing the ongoing danger even now. After Tupac was shot and you were in the hospital, the prosecutor asked, "Did you convey your suspicions about Sean Combs' involvement to law enforcement?" Knight scoffed them. Vegas PD? They didn't want to solve it. They had their own agenda. And who was going to believe me? Suge Knight pointing the finger at the golden boy Puffy. He maintained that the official investigations were deliberately misdirected or insufficient, never truly probing the financial backing that would have been necessary for such a sophisticated assassination. He implied that Diddy's money and influence helped ensure the real culprits and orchestrators were never brought to justice. Diddy watched the screen, his face a mixture of rage and disbelief. He shook his head repeatedly, conferring in heated whispers with his lawyers. To be accused of Tupac's murder by Suge Knight in the middle of his sex trafficking trial was a strategic nightmare, regardless of the accusation's ultimate legal probability. Here, the prosecutor then asked Knight about the aftermath of Tupac's murder and the subsequent murder of the notorious B.I. 6 months later. "Mr. Knight, do you believe Biggie Smalls' murder was a retaliation for Tupac's death?" Knight paused. That's what they wanted everyone to believe. Made it look like a simple street beef. Coast against coast. Convenient. "But you believe it was more complicated?" asked the prosecutor. "Everything with Puff is more complicated," Knight retorted. He then suggested that Biggie might have known too much about Diddy's alleged dealings or the bounty on Tupac, and that his death served to silence a potential witness and conveniently fuel the East-West narrative, deflecting attention from other motives. This was pure speculation, but delivered with Knight's characteristic certainty. So to be clear, Mr. Tonight, the prosecutor summarized, is it your sworn testimony that you have information leading you to believe that Sean Combs offered a substantial sum of money for the murder of Tupac Shakur? Suge Knight looked directly into the camera as if addressing Diddy himself. $1 million, Puff put it out there. He's responsible for Pac's death, period. The courtroom erupted. Reporters were typing frantically. Spectators gasped and murmured loudly. Diddy's lawyer was on his feet again, shouting objections, calling Knight a liar and a perjurer. The judge banged the gavel, restoring a semblance of order, but the bombshell had been detonated. The sheer audacity of the accusation coming from Tupac's closest associate at the time of his death was stunning. Suge Knight, a man steeped in the violence of that era, was now from a prison cell, pointing the finger directly at Sean Combs for orchestrating one of the most high-profile murders in modern history. The jurors were visibly stunned, their faces betraying a mixture of shock and intense curiosity. They had been tasked with evaluating Diddy's character and credibility in relation to the sex trafficking charges. And now they were hearing allegations of him masterminding a murder for hire plot against his biggest musical rival. Diddy's reaction was one of barely controlled fury. He appeared to be shouting at the video screen, though his microphone was off. His lawyers placed restraining hands on his shoulders, trying to calm him. The image of Diddy, the suave billionaire, losing his composure as his imprisoned nemesis accused him of murder was incredibly powerful. The media frenzy that ensued was colossal. Suge Knight accuses Diddy of Tupac murder plot in court. The headlines were explosive. The long-dormant conspiracies were not just reawakened. They were given a jolt of adrenaline by Knight's sworn, albeit virtual, testimony. Legal analysts immediately began debating the admissibility and impact of Knight's testimony. While his credibility was undoubtedly an issue, a convicted felon with a clear bias against Diddy, the fact that the prosecution chose to call him indicated they believed his story or parts of it could be corroborated, or at least serve their purpose of portraying Diddy as a ruthless criminal figure. The prosecution's strategy seemed clear to establish that Diddy's alleged criminal enterprise was not a recent development, but had roots going back decades involving extreme violence and a willingness to eliminate rivals or threats through any means necessary. Suge Knight's testimony, however tainted, fit this narrative perfectly. They were attempting to show the jury that if Diddy was capable of plotting the murder of Tupac Shakur, then the allegations of him coercing, abusing, and trafficking women were well within his capacity for cruelty and criminality. It was a high-risk, high-reward tactic. The defense would have a field day attacking Suge Knight's character and motives during cross-examination, assuming they even got the chance to meaningfully cross-examine a witness, appearing remotely from prison under such circumstances. They would portray him as an opportunist, settling old scores and enjoying the spotlight from his cell. Yet some of Knight's assertions, particularly about the $1 million bounty, had been rumored for so long and by so many different sources over the years that his testimony under oath gave them a new, more menacing weight. It was no longer just a street legend. It was now part of the official court record in Diddy's federal trial. Knight's claim that Diddy's money and influence helped misdirect the original Tupac murder investigation also played into the prosecution's theme of Diddy being a master manipulator adept at evading accountability for his actions. It suggested a long history of obstructing justice. The testimony also served to remind the court of the sheer brutality of the death row bad boy feud, a conflict that Diddy was at the very center of. It painted him not as a reluctant participant, but as an active aggressor who was allegedly willing to escalate the conflict to murderous levels. For Diddy, this was another devastating blow to his already shattered reputation. To be publicly accused in a federal trial of involvement in Tupac's murder by Suge Knight himself was a public relations catastrophe of epic proportions. Regardless of the eventual legal outcome of these specific allegations, the connection Knight tried to draw to Biggie's subsequent murder, suggesting Biggie might have been silenced because he knew too much about Diddy's role in Tupac's death, added another layer of sinister intrigue, essentially accusing Diddy of being involved in the deaths of both rap titans. This was the ultimate ghost from Diddy's past, a specter of violence and betrayal that had always lurked in the shadows of his success. Suge Knight from his prison cell was attempting to drag it into the harsh light of day, forcing Diddy to confront the darkest rumors of his career. The prosecution would likely argue that this alleged murder plot against Tupac was the ultimate act of control and elimination, a precursor to the patterns of coercion and abuse they accused Diddy of perpetrating against women years later. It was all part of the same alleged criminal mindset. The image of Suge Knight, a notorious figure himself, acting as a purveyor of truth against Diddy, was deeply ironic, yet strangely compelling. It was as if the demons of Diddy's past were rising up to demand a reckoning one by one. The fact that this testimony was delivered via video link from a maximum security prison only added to the surreal and dramatic nature of the proceedings. It was a stark reminder of the violent world both men had once inhabited and the long-lasting consequences of that era. The jurors now had to weigh the words of a convicted felon against a defendant already accused of a litany of serious crimes. Who was more credible? Or were they both figures from a world so steeped in violence and deceit that truth was an almost impossible commodity to find? Knight's assertion that Diddy was desperate because Tupac was outselling and outshining him provided a clear and understandable motive for the alleged murder plot. Professional jealousy taken to a lethal extreme. This was a motive the jury could easily grasp. The details, like the alleged indirect approaches about a bounty and the presence of Diddy's associates in Vegas, while perhaps hard to corroborate, forensically now painted a plausible picture of how such a plot might have been initiated and executed in the shadows of the music industry. The accusation that Diddy put money on it, the $1 million bounty, was the explosive core of Suge's testimony. It transformed Diddy from a mere rival into an alleged orchestrator of a contract killing, one of the most heinous crimes imaginable. Did's furious, though muted by his lawyer's reaction on screen as Suge spoke, did him no favors. Much like his outburst during Kid Cud's testimony, it could be interpreted by the jury as the reaction of a guilty man enraged at being exposed, rather than falsely accused. The prosecution's willingness to use a witness as controversial as Suge Knight signaled their determination to use every tool at their disposal to convict Diddy, even if it meant delving into the murky, violent history of the 90s rap scene. This testimony about Tupac's murder plot, following so closely on the heels of Gene Deal's allegations about Biggie's death and Kid Cudi's attempted murder claims, was creating a cumulative picture of Diddy as a man surrounded by extreme violence, whether as an instigator or a complicit party. Knight's claim that the official investigations into Tupac's murder were misdirected, or that authorities didn't want to solve it, would resonate with many who have long believed in a cover-up or a failure of justice in that iconic case. He was tapping into decades of public suspicion. The specific detail of Knight believing Diddy put a bounty on both his and Tupac's head added a personal element to his testimony. He wasn't just a witness to Tupac's targeting, but an intended victim himself, which could in the jury's eyes explain his enduring conviction about Diddy's guilt. By implicating Diddy in Tupac's murder, Suge was also by extension undermining any attempt by Diddy to portray himself as a victim of the East Coast-West Coast feud, or as someone who was merely defending his artists and his label. Knight painted Diddy as a primary aggressor. The courtroom drama was now operating on multiple levels. The current sex trafficking charges, the allegations related to Biggie's death, the Kid Cudi attempted murder claims, and now the alleged plot to assassinate Tupac Shakur. Diddy was being engulfed by the totality of his past. The prosecution's narrative was becoming increasingly clear. Sean Combs was in their view a criminal mastermind who had used violence, intimidation, and murder, or attempted murder as tools to build and protect his empire from its very inception. Suge Knight's video testimony, despite its controversial source, added a significant and deeply disturbing chapter to this narrative, one that could irrevocably shape the jury's perception of Did's character and his capacity for extreme criminality. The challenge for the defense would be to convince the jury that Suge Knight was simply a liar, a man with nothing to lose, seeking revenge and relevance from his prison cell. But the detailed nature of his accusations fitting so neatly with long-held theories would make that a difficult task. The million-dollar question that Suge Knight's testimony raised was, if Diddy was indeed involved in plotting Tupac's murder, what else was he capable of? It cast a long, dark shadow over all the other allegations he faced. The image of Suge Knight, the fallen king of death row, Virtually confronting Sean Combs, the embattled king of bad boy, was a moment freighted with nearly 30 years of violent history, recrimination, and unresolved tragedy. It was a reckoning of sorts. Even if Knight's testimony didn't directly prove the current sex trafficking charges, its potential to obliterate Diddy's character in the eyes of the jury was immense. It was being painted as a figure capable of the ultimate betrayal and the ultimate crime. The prosecution had now linked Diddy to alleged plots or violence against 3 major figures in his life or career: Tupac Shakur, Biggie Smalls, and Kid D. The pattern, they would argue, was undeniable and spoke to a consistent modus operandi. Diddy's trial had transformed from a case about alleged sexual exploitation into a sweeping historical epic of crime, violence, and betrayal in the highest echelons of the music industry, with Diddy portrayed as the central villain. Suge Knight's raspy voice accusing Diddy of orchestrating Tupac's murder from a prison video feed was a haunting echo from a brutal past, now directly impacting Diddy's perilous present. The walls were closing in, not just from recent accusers, but from the ghosts of decades past. The jury was now faced with the unenviable task of discerning truth from fiction, bias from genuine recollection in a case filled with larger-than-life life characters, shocking allegations, and deep-seated vendettas. Suge Knight's testimony added an extraordinary layer of complexity. The claim that Diddy used money and influence to stymie the Tupac investigation would surely be explored further, as it spoke directly to the kind of power and impunity the prosecution accused Diddy of wielding throughout his career. Suge's suggestion that Biggie's murder was a convenient way to deflect attention from Diddy's alleged role in Tupac's death was a particularly dark insinuation, implying a level of Machiavellian scheming that was breathtaking in its audacity. The courtroom was left to ponder. Was Suge Knight a desperate, vengeful liar? Or was he, despite his own notorious past, finally speaking a terrible truth about Sean Combs and the murder of Tupac Shakur that had been suppressed for far too long? The aftershocks of this testimony would undoubtedly reignite public demand for a re-examination of Tupac's murder, with a specific focus on the allegations leveled by Suge Knight against Sean Combs. The pressure on authorities would be immense. Diddy's defense team now faced not only the task of defending him against the current charges, but also of trying to rehabilitate his image from accusations that painted him as one of history's most notorious musical villains. The silence in the courtroom after Suge Knight's video feed ended was profound, broken only by the frantic clicking of keyboards as reporters relayed the bombshell accusations to the world. Diddy sat, ashen-faced, the weight of yet another devastating testimony pressing down upon him. The prosecution had strategically brought forth a witness from Diddy's deepest, darkest past. A man synonymous with the violence Diddy was now accused of perpetuating in different forms. It was a calculated move to show the jury the alleged decades-long continuum of Diddy's ruthlessness. As the trial recessed, the question on everyone's mind was whether Suge Knight's explosive allegations, however controversial their source, would be the final blow that shatters any remaining doubt about Sean Combs' true nature, sealing his fate, not just in this trial, but in the annals of music history.